We're going to continue our series in Elisha, of the prophet Elisha in 2 Kings, and this was many, many years ago. I was actually up in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, serving as the associate pastor up there, and I was leading a young adults, college-age Bible study Sunday mornings before church. And we got to we actually were leading it in the pastor's house that was next to the church. He let us crash his living room every Sunday morning, poor guy. And we were sitting there, and as the students were coming in, as the college age, young adults were coming in, we were saying hi, doing our morning greetings. And there's this one young lady, I'm going to call her Betsy, because I really can't remember her real name. But she came in, and she was just bawling. You ever had one of those moments where it's like, hey, 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 and then you walk and she comes in. She could tell she'd been crying all morning. I mean, like her face was red, her eyes were just puffed up, like she was just, like the worst thing had ever happened to her. And she was, I was like, hey, Betsy, how are you doing? She's like, I'm like, is everything okay? What's wrong? I'm like, oh my goodness, something just happened horrible. So I had to put on my, pastor, okay, go into caring mode. I'm like, what's wrong? Is there anything I can do? And she was like, Pastor Drew. I'm like, yes. She's like, my pet chicken died. She just busted out crying. No joke. Her pet chicken. She had a pet chicken. I don't know if anybody has a pet chicken in here, but that's okay. She had a pet chicken that lived inside her house, slept in her bed, died. I'm usually a compassionate man. But when she said her pet chicken died, it took everything in me not to just be just bust out laughing. Or just like, what? You're that upset? It's a pet chicken? It's a chicken? Who cares, is what I wanted to say. I know that's the most uncompassionate thing in the world, but I'm just being honest here. There were so many thoughts in my head, like, crispy or fried? I mean, it was horrible. It was one of those moments where I just had to stop myself, and the filter kicked in. I was a good person at the time. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear about your pet chicken. It's okay. And then she was like, is my chicken going to be in heaven? And I'm going, I can't do this right now. But poor Betsy, she was devastated that her chicken had died. And all I was thinking was that's what you're caring about right now? There's the world is falling apart. The world seems to be in chaos, and you're worried about a pet chicken. And I thought, who can, do you have a story? Go ahead. Okay, let's hear it.
I had an aunt that had a pet chicken. and when that chicken was a hen, and when she'd get ready to lay, she'd come in and hop up in my aunt's bed and lay her egg. It is. My aunt had a pet chicken.
So she's not the only one with the pet chicken, and the hen actually laid eggs. When the chicken died, was your aunt okay?
I don't remember that.
Okay. So that's all right. I love it. There's two people that I know now had a pet chicken that slept in their bed. Anyway, I was, the whole time I thought, who cares? And she was so worried, and she wanted to know, about her chicken and everything like that. And I looked around, and I see, the world seems to be in chaos right now. There's so many things that are going on. There's so many problems more than just the chicken that dies. And sometimes I wonder, and sometimes there's people we can look around and say, does God care? Even if I don't care, does God care about what's going on? Does God care when things get hard? Does God care when things go in chaos? And really, I'm asking, does he care? Because I know why bad things happen. When bad things happen, I'm not asking why bad things happen, because the reason bad things happen is we live in a fallen world. We live in a sinful world. God made the world perfect, and then we sinned, and because of that sin, there's punishment, and there's a fallen world. That's why good things or bad things happen to good people. That's why people die. That's why our time is limited here. We've sinned. We brought the effects of sin into this place. That's why there's death. That's why there's natural disaster. That's why there's bad things that happen. It's sin. So here's the thing. I know why, but when those bad things happen, when the effects of sin affect us, does God care? Or as many pictures show, is God just sitting up there in heaven, making everything, letting the earth go and say, you know what, I'm indifferent to what happens to all of us. I made it, you messed it up. You lay in your own bed, right? I mean, does God care about what's happening right now over in Iran and the Middle East and Russia and North Korea and all those people that are dying right now? Or about all the unrest and the attacks that are here in the U.S.? I mean, those are big events, but what about the small events? Does God care about my friend who just lost his job? Or the man whose wife is about to die? Or the person who can't pay the bills? Or maybe just the pain in someone's back? I had my pastor friend text me this morning that said, hey, pray for me. I did something to my back and I've got to preach this morning, but I can barely move. Or the teen that just broke up with her boyfriend. Or the broken-hearted chicken girl. Or what about me? Does God care about me? Because you know what? I look around and I see all these other big problems. Look at everything else and I realize, I'm not even close as important as all those other things. Why would he even care about me? This passage that we're going to look at today kind of begins to show the answer to this question. It kind of introduces us to this question, or gives us a picture to the answer. And we begin to find the answer in probably the most random event in this book, in 2 Kings. I love this passage. My parents used to read these Bible storybooks to me, where it had all these pictures, and we loved growing up on those Bible picture books. And they would always read this story, and for the longest time, I didn't even know if it was in the Bible, because I would go through the Bible and I would hear the sermons, and I never really read this part or heard this part because it's such a small passage. It's such a random passage. In fact, it's stuck in between two big miracles that Elisha does. And there's these 7 verses. So we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 6. 2 Kings chapter 6, and to give you a background of where we are so far, Israel has been split into 2 kingdoms. The northern kingdom is Israel, the southern kingdom is Judah, and Elisha is the prophet at this time. And Elisha is doing all these miracles, and he is the one that represents God in the northern kingdom. He's the one that represents God and speaks for God in Israel. And right before the passage that we're going to read is this huge miracle that we looked at last week, if you were here, where God healed Naaman, this commander, this ruler, this very important guy. God healed him by him dipping in the water 7 times of leprosy, and he was clean. This big miracle. The passage after this is actually where the army, the king of Aram, who actually, has been attacking the Israelites, apparently is happy that his commander's healed now, so he decides to attack again. And he's trying to attack the Israelites, but God keeps telling Elisha where they're going. And God keeps kind of helping Elisha. In fact, one of the times the army comes and Elisha says, God, make them blind. The entire army goes blind. Elisha leads them into, the main city. And he says, open their eyes, and they open their eyes, and they're surrounded by the Israelites. It's these awesome miracles. And here we find this one right here. Chapter 6, 2 Kings chapter 6, verse 1, we're going to begin. The company of the prophets said to Elisha, look, the place where we meet with you is too small for us. Let us go to the Jordan where each of us can get a pole, and let us build a place there for us to live. And he said, go. Now here's what's happening. There's about 100 plus students that are studying under Elisha, that are studying to be a prophet or that are studying to speak for God and to go out and preach. And they're studying and they're learning, and they realize that they keep getting more and more young men, more and more people coming. And eventually, they look around and say, we are packed out here. We are crowded in this little place. I don't know how big the house was that they were trying to stay in. They said, it is way too small for us. We need a bigger place. We need more room. So they got together and said, hey, you know what? There's quite a few of us. If we all went down to the river, cut down a tree or two, we could build our own place. It wouldn't be that hard. So they got together and they came up to Elisha and they said, Elisha, hey, we've got this great idea. We know your house is too small for us, so Elisha, would it be okay if we all went down and built a new place? You wouldn't have to do anything, Elisha. We would do all the work. Well, that's a win-win situation for Elisha. To be like the kids if they came to us one time as a parent, and they're like, Mom, Dad, we have this great idea. We're going to go clean our room. You won't have to do anything. We're going to go clean the room. Wouldn't that be wonderful? So Elisha, of course, he's like, well, yeah, go. That would be great. Go build a house. He'd be like, yes, go clean your room. That'd be wonderful. Sounds like a good idea. Then one of them said, well, won't you please come with your servants? Elisha, your presence represents God's presence. When you are there with us, we know that God is with us. Even though we know God's everywhere, but we just know that you represent God, and we want you to be with us wherever we go. So will you come down to the river with us? This isn't really like saying, Mom, Dad, come help me clean the room. This is just come be with me. Come spend the time with us while we do the work. So Elisha, I don't know if he thought about it. I don't know if he had to debate about it. He said, I will. I will, Elisha replied. So he went with them. He went with them, and they went to the Jordan. They began to cut down the trees. Now there's hundreds of young men, hundreds of prophets that are studying, cutting down trees, dropping them down, getting them ready to turn into logs, getting ready to start building this house. It says, as one of them was cutting down the tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. It said, oh my Lord, he cried out, it was borrowed. Now here's the thing about this iron axe head, it's so random. But this axe that he had borrowed was a very, very costly tool. Especially the iron axe, the iron head on the axe. And this century, it was way too expensive. During this time, it had been way too expensive for a young student, a prophet, to buy one of these. So any of them that they had to start borrowing. Running around town, they borrowed as many as they could to start chopping down the trees. This 12 to 15 pound iron head. As he was swinging it, apparently it fell off and fell in the water. Now here's the thing. This was a huge, costly mistake. Because if you borrowed something and could not return it, you then had to be a bondservant to work off the value of this axe. So this head falls into the river, the Jordan. You can't see the bottom of the Jordan. It falls in. He kind of knows where it went, but there's no way they can find it. There's no way they can get it back. And he looks and he's like, oh no, what am I going to do? Now I have to go work for this man. I can't study anymore. I can't be a student anymore. Now I have to go work off as a bondservant to try to pay for this axe. This big, costly mistake. It's one of those moments, I don't know if you've had one of those moments where where your stomach just drops, or you feel like you're like, oh man, my life is over. Even though when you look back later on, it wasn't that bad, but it's just one of those moments your heart sinks, your heart stops. It's like when I was 16 years old, we got my license, and my friends and I would always go camping up at Lake Erie. We'd take a long weekend, 3 or 4 days, we'd get tents and we'd go up to Lake Erie. My dad had a boat at the time, and he also had a truck. We talked my dad into letting me drive the truck and the boat up to Lake Erie one weekend. So I get in, my 3 other friends pack in the truck, and we're driving, and I had to pull off on the side of the road for some reason. I was down the road, and then I had to back the truck up to turn around. I had never backed a trailer up before in my life. So I get the truck, I put it in reverse, and I'm backing into this person's driveway to turn around, and they had these beautiful flower beds along the side of the first turn I do, I realize that you have to turn opposite to make the trailer go the wrong way. It's really confusing. And I run right through the first side of the flower bed. I'm like, oh no. So I pull up again, I try it again, I hit the other side of the flower bed. Like, this is horrible. So I go forward, I go back again, and I jackknife the trailer right into the back of the tailgate of my dad's truck and just crunch. I heard that crunch and my stomach just dropped. My life was over. I was going to be a bondservant for the rest of my life to pay off my debt. Because not only have I ruined 2 flower beds, but my dad's truck is now a goner. I did not enjoy that camping trip. However, my dad is wonderful. He got home and he looked at the dent and said, I think that was there before you left. So, great man. Very forgiving. But that would be that feeling that this man that felt. The axe head goes in, and he's like, my life is over. So he cries out to the only one he knows. Cries out to Elisha. He cries out to God. He says, oh, my Lord. He's calling Elisha, Lord, Elisha, this was borrowed. Do you realize what this is going to do to my life? And here's the thing. Elisha at this point was delivering the armies. Elisha at this point was doing huge miracles, was healing leprosy, was making armies blind. He was doing all these big miracles, and a small little axe head that fell in the water is no big deal. It's just an axe. Who cares? It's like a chicken dying. Who cares? That's no big deal. I've got over 100 more prophets that I'm training right now. You're just one of them. That's not that big a deal. You know what? Go work for a year, pay it off, come back when you're ready. It's not that big. But it says the man of God asked, well, where did it fall? When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick, threw it there. I have no idea. If you ask me why he did this, I don't know. This is just how God told him to do the miracle. He cut a stick, he threw the stick, and made the iron float. Lift it out, he said, and the man reached out his hand and took it. That's the end of the miracle. I love this. I love this because Elisha did not say, who cares? Elisha did not say, well, good luck. Elisha took time, and God worked a miracle. Why? Why put this random event right here? I believe it is to show the simple truth. The simple truth that, you know what? At this point, there's many of the Israelites, most of the Israelites had turned away from God and were worshiping Baal at this time. Most of the Israelites, the king of the Israelites, most of them had turned away from God. This small number of prophets were outnumbered at the time. Everywhere they looked was sin, was abounding. Everywhere they looked, there was so much worship of Baal. And there were so many people denying God. And I'm sure at this point, these prophets, even though there was 100 of them, I'm sure at this point they felt outnumbered. They felt overwhelmed. And I bet they were even asking themselves, are we even making a difference in our world today? Because you know what? Right now our world is burning and it is falling apart. And I don't know if you've ever felt like that. I don't know if you've ever just felt overwhelmed with everything that you're doing, or if you've ever felt outnumbered, or if you've looked around and questioned yourself, am I even making a difference? Because right now I look around and I do not see a difference. And if I'm outnumbered and I'm overwhelmed and I'm not making a difference, does God even care? I think this was God's way of showing this group, this man of his faithful followers, that their God is really alive and that he cares about them. He cares about them so much, he cares even about their little problems. I love it because God cared enough about this servant's tiny little problem that he does this really cool miracle, because no matter how many times I've tried, I have never been able to make metal like that float. And this beautiful random picture is this theme. I know this just starts to introduce it, but this theme runs throughout Scripture over and over and over again. We find that God says, I care about you. No matter how big your need is, no matter how small your need is, no matter how humble it might be, I care. If we stop and think about that, the God that made the heavens and the earth, the God that made all those billions of stars, the God that made everything, actually cares and is concerned about you and your life and your problems. Luke 12, 6 through 7 is this great passage, and it says this. It talks about the sparrows, and it says, "Are not 5 sparrows sold for 2 pennies? Yet not one of them is forgotten by God." Go ahead and go to the next one because I'm not going to flip through it. There you go. "Indeed, the very hairs on your head are all numbered. Don't be afraid, you are worth more than many sparrows." God says this, he uses the sparrow because the sparrow was the cheapest edible bird at that time. If you wanted cheap meat, like spam's expensive actually now, so I can't use spam as an example. But if you wanted cheap meat, the cheapest meat you could find was a sparrow. And he says, you know what? I know every little sparrow that goes. I know every little chicken that goes. And if I'm concerned about them, how much more am I concerned about you? In fact, I know you so well. I know you better than you know yourself. I know every hair that is on your head. I know every hair that is in your beard. I know everything about you because I care about you. You are so valuable to God. Even in Scripture, he gives all these illustrations about what he does for you. In the Scripture, he says he searches for you like a person who searches for the lost coin. He says, I love you so much, I'm going to find you. It says he leaves 99 to find one. That's how much he loves you and cares about you. He waits for you like the lost son who goes away, and he waits for you, and he can't wait for you to come home to wrap his arms around you. That's how much he loves you. And he cares even the smallest things. When Ben was really little, he had this really cool pajamas. That was a Superman pajamas. Superman pajamas that had a Superman cape, had the cape that Velcroed on. It was the coolest thing ever. I wish they made them for adults. They don't. I looked. But I remember when he was little, he was going to bed one night and he got his, Superman pajamas on, but he was devastated because he could not find the cape. And you can't have the Superman pajamas without the cape. I mean, he was just really, really little, and he was going around looking for this cape, and he was in tears, but he could not find the cape. And I don't know if he remembers this at all, but he was so small, and at one point when we were looking for the cape, I was like, you know what, we just got to go to bed. It's late. I'm a Nazi on bedtime. Just ask my kids. I'm like, it is bedtime, go to bed. Like, it's time to go to bed. And he's like, I can't find my cape, and he was crying. He's like, can we pray to find my cape? I thought, well, I guess we can. I guess maybe God is concerned about your Superman cape. God is even concerned and cares when you lose your Superman cape. 1 Peter 5:7 says this, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. God not only cares about you. God is not only concerned about your problems, but he wants to help you solve the problems. He wants to help carry your problems so that in return we can give honor and glory back to him. So that as we live life, we can say, you know what, I know all this, but my God is so amazing, my God is so wonderful, my God is so great that he cares about me. And I can take all my concerns, all my problems, I can put it on him, and he will carry them for me. Because my God cares about me. So this morning, as our worship team comes forward, I just want you to remember this week. As you go through the week, as the difficult times come or the great times come, I just want you to remember that, you know what? God cares. God cares about a girl who loses her pet chicken. Even though I don't, God does. God cares about you. God cares about the man whose wife is about to pass away. God says, trust me. And when we cast our cares on him, he will shoulder those cares. He will raise the axe head. And all we have to do is trust him. This morning, let's stand. Let's worship our God who is worthy and cares for us.